Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So, how's it going? It's been a long day since the last time we met. 1 week ago, and today is Thursday, September 16th, 2021. So, we are going to learn together how to translate a text using indirect translation. And also, we are going to learn about the basic thing of translation, like what is indirect translation itself. So there will be some techniques regarding indirect translation that we are going to learn today. And without further ado, before we start, it will be better if we start presentation by doing prayer together. Prayer too. Thank you. So, as always, there will be a question and answer at the end of presentation. Let's get started, shall we? Yeah. As you know that today is going to be the turn of me, Rizky Crisanto, and our beloved, lovely sister, Binta Ihtada. So we are going to learn and present about indirect translation. Next, please. Yeah, there will be 4 articles that we are going to review, and 2 of them are Indonesian article in their indirect translation, and 2 more will be overseas articles. The first one, the first topic that we have for Indonesian will be constructive analysis of discourse representation in Indonesia newspaper Kompas and English newspaper reports, Jakarta Post. And the second one, in Indonesian article, will be translation technique of English into Indonesian subtitle by Jan Bajrani movie. And for the English or overseas articles will be translating way culture and look at how indirect translation affected the cultural aspects of the book. You are first far side quoted. So basically this is not Indonesian. This is not English a word by Simon Stanley Hag when it was translated into Japanese using English as a default language. And last article of overseas will be an English of translation technique in the English versions of Ar-Rahman Surah Ar-Rahman. Next, please. The first Indonesian article that we are going to review is entitled Constructive Analysis of Discourse Representation in Indonesia Newspaper, Kompas, and English newspaper reports, Jakarta Post. And it was made by Syaf Riyadin from University of Bengkulu. And also it has already been published in Academic Journal of English Language and Education in 2019. Next, please. So we can start from the basic thing, which is introduction. From the background of this article, discourse representation is one of the parts in discourse which has important role in analyzing the text of news reports. Discourse representations theory, or DRT, is a formal semantic model of the processing of text in context which has applications in discourse understanding. And then for DRT, or discourse representation theory, grew out of Montague's model theoretic semantics from Thomason in 1974, which represents the meaning of utterance as logical forms and supports the calculation of the truth condition of an utterance. And I found also the reason for wanting to research to this topic back in 2019 when reading articles online about translation for an assignment and stumbled across a paper from Alexandria Asis Rosa in 2017, examining various issues that concern indirect translation. This is what sparked my curiosity and got me interested in further researching indirect translation. So that was the reason why the researcher in this article want to research about what indirect translation is. So next, please. Theoretical framework. So the framework of critical discourse analysis has been used in analysis of the news discourse for far fair cloth in 1992 describes the concept of discourse representation, wherein there is a form of intertextually in which parts of other texts are taken into a text marked with devices such as quotation marks and reporting clauses. So this kind of thing, question mark and reporting clauses will be some of the main parts of indirect translation. Next, please. So now is another part of this article called representing verbs. So not only uh, the things that I have already mentioned before, but it is related with verb as well. So the choice of the representing verb is closely associated with the extent to which represented discourse is controlled by representing in 112 English Franca, volume 3, number 2, 2019 discourse. Various kinds of representing verbs are used in news report. So basically, there are some the basic thing in their indirect translation that I have already mentioned before. But the most important thing is that we are going to talk about the relation between verb and also verb in indirect translation. Next, please. Yeah. So in this article, there are some researchers have already divided some categories related indirect translation. The first one is that reporting verbs like sell, I say, and tell. The second one is that mental and thought, and for the verbs is the wonder and the recall. So this kind of thing, reporting verbs and mental will be the parts of translation, indirect translation, and there are two other verbs that are related with indirect translation. The third one is the manner of speaking verbs like shout, and the last one is the speech act. So or illocutionary, and the verbs is warn and reclaim. So it's for the speech act, I think we have already learned before with when we were in the second semester. So it's not going to be hard for us. It's not going to be difficult for us to understand more about speech act, I think. Next, please. So indirect discourse representation. Indirect discourse. This form of discourse consists of the reporting clause and uh, the reported clause. No quotation marks are used. It is clear whose voice is represented. The represented discourse could be a verbatim report of the original utterance. However, the original utterance of the represented discourse is generally summarized or paraphrased. So one more, I just want to stress out the main part of an indirect discourse. First one is no quotation marks are used, and it is clear whose voice is represented. Represented. Okay. Next, please. And next one is going to be research methodology in design of the study. So the design of the study in this article is the study applied descriptive qualitative design which used the contrastive analysis that aimed to know what are the differences and similarities of discourse representation in Indonesian newspaper and English newspaper reports. So we're gonna this article is going to talk about the differences and the similarities, the discourse presentation in Indonesia and also in English newspaper as well. Next, please. And the source of the data of this article is that from Kompas, from Kompas. Kompas, as we all know, that Kompas is as the representative of Indonesian newspaper and Jakarta Post. And also Jakarta Post is as representative of English newspaper. So these two newspapers are very familiar with all Indonesian people. So the same thing with the researcher in this article too. I think they take two familiar and famous newspapers from Indonesia. Next, please. And the procedure of the data collection. Collected the newspaper from Kompas, Indonesian newspaper, and Jakarta Post English newspaper. So basically, as I told you before, in this source of the data, this article or this or the researcher in this article take to newspapers platform from Kompas and also Jakarta Post. Next, please. And the next one is that decide and read the parts of discourse representation as an object of the study. So the researcher in this article has already decided and read and also read the parts of discourse, and there are two main of important point that the researcher has already decided. The first one is underlined the discourse representation in both newspapers, and the second one is that identified the representing verbs and modes of discourse representation. Next, please. And the next one is that technique of data analysis. We gathered that data were qualitatively by following steps. And the first one is doing classification of the data based on representing verbs and discourse representation. So doing classification and blah 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 is the first point. And for the second one is that making description and generalization of every data in terms of representing verbs and discourse representation. And the last one, the technique of the data analysis that this researcher does is finding out similarities and difference among the newspapers in terms of discourse representation. So as you all know that these three steps are very important, and also we can take the beneficial of this step of of technique, especially in when we are using qualitative research. Next, please. The findings. Representing verbs in Indonesian newspaper report Kompas and English newspapers from Jakarta Post, and these two newspapers have related with and the first point that the researcher is pointing out is that representing verbs in Indonesian newspaper report, and the second one representing verbs in representing verbs in direct discourse. So as we all know, as I told you in the beginning, that the verb is going to be big trouble. It's going to be big obstacle for us when we want to translate the words, especially using using indirect translation. Next, please. Representing verbs indirect discourse. So shows this table shows how uh, what how the researcher did when he did research, and this is the result what he has done, and then already has been showed uh, on the table. First one is reporting verbs. Mengatakan the verbs the words of mengatakan, menjelaskan, menyampaikan, mengusulkan, menuturkan, and blah blah blah. You can read by yourself, and then there are also the total of the words exist in the article that he has already observed before, and then speech act verbs as well. So and then total as well, the total of speech act verbs and the mental verb as well, and the total. So basically, um, the researcher in this article has already explored all the parts related to the verbs in the article that he has already explored before. Verb. The main basic thing is that the verb. So we have to focus on the verb. One more. Yeah, verb is very the major thing in translating paragraph or sentences. Next, please. And the total number of direct discourse and indirect discourse encompass in Jakarta Post. So we have already seen on the screen that the article that has been reviewed by the researcher in this article is that from the Compass, the total of the direct discourse is 594, and then for the Jakarta Post is 576. Yeah, next please. Next please. Yeah, discussion. So in Indonesian newspaper, especially in Kompas and English newspaper from Jakarta Post, are almost similar in terms of discourse representation because Indonesian language and English have the same structures. However, the difference can appear at looking the representing verbs and form of discourse representation. All in all, indirect discourse has the largest portion in this issue that happen to those newspapers. Speech act verbs, mental verbs, and the manner of speaking exists in newspaper, even though the portion of the number of speech act verbs are less than indirect discourse, but the speech act verbs are more varieties than reporting verbs. So yeah, it is clear that there are lots, there are ton of words, and and those words are related with indirect translation. Yeah. Next, please. Yeah. For the conclusion, based on the findings of the study, it can be concluded that Indonesian newspaper and English newspaper are more dominated by indirect discourse. Besides, those newspapers are those newspapers also comprised several representing verbs such as reporting verbs, mental verbs, manner of speaking verb, and speech act verb. So yeah, it has been told by this article that the most of the article in Kompas and also Jakarta Post are more dominated by indirect discourse. So if you want to research, especially in indirect translation, you can go to those platforms. You can go to those familiar platforms that I have already told you before, Compass and also Jakarta Post. Next, please. Uh, yeah, I think that's all for the Indonesian article that I have already told you that I have already presented to you guys. So for the second article is from overseas, from another country. The title is Translating Away Culture, a look at how indirect translation affected the cultural aspects of the book, or uh, or Cyclotid by Simon Stellenhag when it was translated into Japanese using English as a default language. And it was made by Adam Osbach in 2021. Next, please. Yeah. Introduction and the background of the article is this study will explore how the translation of culture specific aspects are affected when they are translated through AMG or mediating text instead of directly from the ASCII or source text. So the original version of the text. Okay. And indirect translation. So I forgot to tell you the main meaning of indirect translation itself. So basically, indirect translation is the translation method that is used when translating into a TT or target text using AMG or mediating text or the translation of the ST and source text that is used as a source for another translation instead of the source text. Yeah, that is the clear meaning of indirect translation. Yep. Next, please. And understanding and direct translation. For the most part, there is not much difference between the theories, concepts, and methods that are used for studying indirect translation and those that are generally employed in the field of translation studies. And since there is large overlap, one can often accept to see popular theories such as equivalency, scopus, and etc. And one thing that sets apart studies on indirect translation from the rest is that there is a greater focus on the importance of the sources. So, in this method, in this technique, which is indirect translation, is it is focused. It is more focused on the importance of the sources or the ST itself. The next is and the material that has been explored and reviewed by um, the researcher in this article is that the Swedish science fiction book, um, which is called by were first quoted in 2004 and created by Simon Stellenhag, and its subsequent translation into English and Japanese, and the English version tells from the Lope in 2005. It was translated directly from the Swedish source text by translator Martin Junedid. So as I told you before that, the book that has been reviewed as called by you are first quoted. Yeah, next please. And the method that is used is that comparative analysis to examine the differences between the Swedish source text and English mediating text and Japanese target text. This is done to highlight when and where changes were made during the translation process. Yeah, this is the way the researcher uh, do research to detect that has been reviewed before. And this is the criteria for case selection. Next, please. Criteria for case selection. And there are some questions here that uh, that comes up and also it has been produced. It has been produced by the researcher. And the first one is that does the word in question have any implied cultural meaning behind it, or does it refer to something cultural, something that might be hard to pick up on if you are unfamiliar with Swedish culture? And the second one is that how does the description of an object math match what is presented in the accompanying illustration? Does it still match after it has been translated or not? So, and next one is that is any meaning lost in the translation? So yeah, there are some questions that going on here, and also basically this is the problem. This is the problem. This is the case that has been selected by the researcher. So we can also apply this kind of the questions when we are going to translate, especially using indirect translation. Next, please. And the result is while collecting data that could serve as my cases, I came across in 128 potential cases. So basically, this researcher has been collected 128 potential cases. And these cases were all gathered by comparing the Swedish ASTI, short text, and the English target text to see where they differed. And this means that he collected data will be slightly switched towards translation techniques that deals with differences such as equivalency and or adaptation. However, there are plenty of feasible places where the translator for the empty mediating text has relied on translation techniques such as literal or borrowing. So I'm going to say that literal or borrowing those words that we learned last time. I mean last week, especially on direct translation. So we must know all of them. We must all of them. So it means that direct translation that we have been learned before has a big related, a big influence with indirect translation itself. Next, please. And the analysis is when examining both the MT and the TT target text translations as a whole. They are both translated with a loyalty that lends more towards the author than it does towards the audience or more. The both that has been translated with a loyalty that lends more towards the author than it does towards the audience. And also, it is the evidence in the mediating text since the names of the characters and locations are kept in the original Swedish from including the use of Swedish vowels. I don't know exactly how to pronounce this one, like a in English it's gonna be like a o, but it's gonna be like hard for Indonesian people, I think, because sometimes the people from Swedish and then Europe, especially Swedish, Germany, they have like own accent, and sometimes we hard to pronounce it. Like in Germany, we have like we don't have it like kind of this thing like for example, and then and bonjour for friends, for example. So you have to learn. You have to learn. Next, please. Uh, it's gonna be a long day. I'm gonna say that it's better for me to read faster because I don't think that we have a lot of time, especially for being it's already 1:39, so I'm gonna be faster, hopefully. For discussion, the first all before going into the main part of discussion, I would like to clarify the limitation of the study. The biggest offense, in my opinion, was during the data collection. And the method I employed created a bias for how the data was collected. So the main concern of the researcher itself is that how the data collection was collected. It is the main concern of this article, um, especially in that, especially in deal with differences such as equivalency or adaptation. So these two, this problem equivalency is gonna be the part that is not to be learned, it's not to be explored. It's not gonna be easy for us to understand, especially for Indonesian people who want to try to translate another languages and using indirect translation. Next, please. And the conclusion of this article is that it is difficult to make a generalized answer to the research question for this paper. So, as I told you before, in this discussion, I'm going to say that I don't have answer. I mean, this researcher doesn't have answer to it. It's because he says by himself that it is difficult to make a generalized answer to the research questions, and it means that I would say that, and I come to point that this article is not that good for you when you want to learn indirect translation. I think, yeah, we need to find another, not this article, when you want to do research, especially in indirect translation. I think that's all for me. So next, please. Next. I think that's all for me. So the next presentation will be delivered and continued by our beloved and lovely sister Binta Ihtada. The chance is yours.
Wait a minute. Hello guys, can you hear my voice?
Yes, Minta, keep going.
Thank you, Mas Rizky, for the chance. And now I will continue the presentation. This is we come to Indonesian article 2. This article is entitled by the translation technique of English into Indonesian subtitle in the Baijan Bajrangi movie. The author of this article is Tira Norfitria, and this article published on 2019 in ELS Journal Interdisciplinary Studies in Humanities. The pages is from 253 up to 265. We come to introduction. Translation deals with two different kinds of language. The first is source language, or the language that is about to translate, and the second one is the target language, or the language that's become a target. While the form of translation can be found in many kind of media, it can be printed and also electronic media. In print media, translation can be found in the book, literary work, or in a legal document. While in electronic media, is we can find in movie, new broadcast, TV show as a product of audiovisual translation, while those voice and text translated in the target language in the form of subtitling or dubbing. The problem of this research is the researcher might find some problem in translating, such as the differences of structure of grammar in both of languages that cannot be ignored. Then the translator must take an effort to learn appropriate translation theories and have a broad knowledge and skill regarding both languages. The important things in translation are the way the translator find equivalent source language. Translating subtitle of the film is not only concerned in the grammatical sentences, but it's also in the utterances as close as possible with the source language in order to make a good and readable subtitle. It's need a good technique to make a good translation in a movie. Then, the aim of this research, the researchers aim to analyze Indonesian subtitle from Bajrangi movie. The literary review. The theoretical foundation. The researcher can translate movie subtitle by using the types translation technique. Molina and Albert 2002 defined that technique of translation is procedure to analyze and classify how translation equivalent work. And Molina and Albert defined the translation technique into 18 types. And I will explain one by one. Adaptation. Adaptation is to replace the cultural element in the search language to the target language. For example, the search language we have the word dear sir. In the target language, we can translate it by yang terhormat. So amplification or addition, it's meant to introduce the tile which not formulated in the search language. For example, is the search language, the employers of all industries took part in this conference. It's mean the target language, meaning by karyawan-karyawan dari semua cabang industri mengambil bagian dalam konversi tersebut. Then there is an additional word meaning in the target language to translate the word industries by cabang. So next is borrowing. Borrowing is include into direct translation technique or has explained by Rere and also Miss Ani before. Count also include into direct translation. So next is compensation. Compensation is to replace the item information or position in the search language into part of target language. For example, we have word search language a couple of weeks. Terjemah asli itu it can be meaning by sepasang minggu, but the target language it can be meaning by 2 minggu. So next is description. Description is replace the term in search language with description in the target language. The search language is I like tumpeng. The word I like tumpeng it can be meaning saya suka tumpeng. Tapi but in English language there is no additional meaning, description meaning about tumpeng. Then we can translate it the description by steamed rice designed in a cone shape. So next is discursive creation. Discursive creation is often appears when the translate title of movie box or novel. Then if we want to translate the discursive creation, we must know the all things in the word. For example, the search language is The Godfather. This is the title of film, and the target language it can be meaning by Sang Godfather. This is more suitable to be an title in a movie. So the next is establish equivalent. Establish equivalent is meaning by technique penerjemah lazim. We use the search language is generally based on our daily. For example, the search language, oh my God. The meaning of oh my God is bukan oh Tuhanku, but we can translate it by ya ampun. So next is generalization. Generalization is translate a term that is already well known in the public, more specific than the target language. For example, we have search language becak or bajai, and the target language we can translate by vehicle. Next is linguistic amplification. Usually used in interpreting or dubbing movie. For example, when we watch a movie in China movie, there is written like in subtitle there is the written kakak pertama, kakak kedua, or in subtitle actually the meaning is same kakak, but because in Chinese language have a long a long language, then in subtitle we also add some meaning there. So the next is linguistic compression. The linguistic compression is the opposite of the linguistic amplification. Next is literal translation. Literal translation is also included into the direct translation. And the next is modulation. Modulation is replace focus, the point of view, either lexical structure. The example here is if the word is you are going to have a baby. This question is asked to a boy or to a boy. Then the target language is we cannot meaning it by you are going to have a baby or you have going to pregnant, but the meaning is you are going to be a father. So particularization is the opposite of the generalization. For example, the word search language rezeki, we can meaning it by money. So reduction is it can be managed shorten information. For example, the source language, the boy got a car accident. We can exactly meaning it by the target language, lelaki itu mengalami kecelakaan. So, substitution. Substitution is this technique is pointing in paralinguistic form. This is about intonation and also gesture. For example, nodding head in Indonesian is translating by yes. And the last is variation. Variation is replace linguistic element of paralinguistic which influence the linguistic variable or dialect. For example, the source language is by the way, we can translate it by ngomong-ngomong. So next, the methodology. In this research, use the descriptive qualitative method to describe the subject or object of the research based on the fact or reality. The data source and the data and source data. The data is utterances or sentences in a movie script which involve two different languages, while the source data in here is Baijan Bajrangi movie. The technique of data collection. The data were collected by using the documentation method in the movie. And the technique of data analysis. Here is the five step to analyze the data. First is reading the transcript and subtitle of the movie. So after that, identifying the translation technique used in the movie subtitle, classifying the translation technique by Molina and Albert theory, researching the reason of application of the techniques used, and the last is drawing the conclusion. So we come to the discussion. In analyzing the types of translation technique, the researcher used subtitle of Baijan Bajrangi movie, which contain 475 utterances. This is the table. Here is the table show the frequencies and the percentage of the type of the translation technique used in subtitle movie Baijan and Bajrangi. There are 11 types of technique proposed by Molina and Albert. Here is the first one is literal. The example is I cannot breathe or speak. The target language meaning by aku tidak bisa bernafas ataupun bisa berbicara. In the example above, show literal technique. Here the translator focus on the search language has the same form and structure to the target language. In the first example, the sentence structure both in the search language and target language are subject plus modal plus noun and also verb. The second one is reduction. The search language is I don't have a passport. The target language it can be meaning by aku tak punya paspor. In the example above, show the reduction. The translator reduces the information item in the target language. The word A as an article is not translated into the target language. If it is translated, it will be meaning by sesuatu or sebuah. So next is modulation. The example is, how many times do I tell you? The target language, it can be meaning by sudah ku bilang berulang kali. It can be meaning by, in the example above, show modulation technique. The translator change the point of view in the sub-source language into the target language. The sentence, how many times do I tell you, in the search language is interrogative sentence, while in the sentence, Indonesian sentence or in the target language, sudah ku bilang berulang kali, is a declarative sentence. But both of sentences have the same meaning. So next is establish equivalent. For the example, it's what's wrong, sir? It can be translated by ada apa. In the example above, it used some daily situation in our personal life or a common term which has been stated in a dictionary or it has been used in the society. The expression of what's wrong, sir, is used for asking someone who looks ill or sad to tell what problem they have. So next is amplification or addition. But don't worry, I will get you home. The target language it can be meaning by, tapi kau jangan khawatir, aku akan mengantarmu. The translator add the information item in the target language. There is an additional item word in target language by cow, which refer to the pronoun. So next is transposition. The search language is I'm going to spy on this pay. The target language is can be meaning by aku akan memata-matai mata-mata ini. And it's meaning by, the second example is found the grammatical item to be plus ing plus 2 plus verb 1. The pattern of simple future tense in a search language is translated into sedang in target language. So the two other is, the example is at Bilal Eatery. The target language of Eatery is translated by di kedai Bilal. In the example above, the word eatery is translated into kedai. The word eatery is usually small and informal restaurant, while the word kedai also refers to the small restaurant. And here is the translator has to create or make a new situation that can be considered as being equivalent both in a search language, eatery, and also the target language kedai. And the last is description. For the example is, the search language is, my name is Pawan Kumar Katurvedi. I'm from Delhi. So the target language meaning by, namaku Pawan Katurvedi, aku dari Delhi, ibu kota India. There is additional information about Delhi. It's meaning by ibu kota India. And the conclusion is, a good translation is the one the target language reader can catch the meaning of text. The translation need to use the appropriate strategies in the translating subtitle text. And we continue to the second article. The article is entitled by an analysis of translation technique in the English version of Ar-Rahman Surah. The author of this article is Farida Repelita Wati Kembaren. This article is published on 2018 in International Journal on Language Research and Education Studies. The pages from the 56 up to 72. The background of the study is the Holy Quran has been translated into many languages, including English. The translator of the Holy Quran have written a way for people to understand the message and the meaning of the Holy Quran easier. Then, the translator of Holy Quran have made it a way for people to understand the message and the meaning of the Holy Quran. The different translator of Holy Quran produce different English version of Al Quran because each of them use different translation technique to translate Al Quran. And here is the problems. The first problem is the translator should produce a translation product of Holy Quran that can be understood easier by the target reader. The translator should not make unnecessary change in the translation of the Holy Quran, which make misunderstanding the message and the meaning of Holy Quran. The translator of Holy Quran produced different English version of Holy Quran because each of them has different translation technique. Well, then the researcher aimed to compare the three English version of Ar-Rahman Surah and also describe the most dominant translation technique used by the three translators to translate the Holy Quran. The translation product. According to Newmark, 1988, translation is rendering the meaning of a text into another language in the way that the author intended the text. According to Holmes, divided the translation into pure and applied research. The pure research is divided into theoretical and descriptive research. Descriptive research has three orientation. The first is product oriented, the second is process oriented, and the last is function oriented. The study is focused on the product oriented, which examine the existing translation studies. So next is the translation technique. The translation technique in this research used proposed by Molina and Albert at 2002. Molina and Albert 2002 define translation technique as procedure to analyze and classify how translation equivalent work. There are 18 translation technique proposed by Molina Albert. Here is the Molina Albert translation technique I have mentioned before. The methodology. The first is research design. This research use descriptive qualitative research oriented to the translation product. The data of this research is 78 verses of Ar-Rahman Surat and the translation of the three different translations. The three different translators are, the first is Maulawi Sher Ali, the second is Dr. Muhammad Taqiyuddin Al-Hilali, and Dr. Muhammad Musin Han, and the last is Talal Itani. The data were analyzed by using translation technique proposed by Molina and Albert 2002. And this article do not provide 78 verse of Ar-Rahman Surat in her finding, but they only provide maybe eight verses. And here is the first verse is of Ar-Rahman Surah. Its meaning by Ar-Rahman. Translate the first translator, its meaning by it is God, the gracious. The technique of translation is amplification and also establish equivalent. Amplification can be meaning by it is God, and establish equivalent, its meaning by the gracious. So the second translator, it's meaning by the most gracious, Allah. The amplification meaning by Allah, and the established equivalent is the gracious. And the last is meaning by Ar-Rahman by the compassionate. The established equivalent, it is used established equivalent technique or meaning also by the compassionate. So second is Asyamsu wal qamaru bihusban. This is the fifth verse of Ar-Rahman Surah. The first translator is meaning by the sun and the moon run their courses according to the fixed reckoning, while the second translator is the sun and the moon run on their fixed courses, exactly calculate with the measure of odd stage for each. And the last translator it meaning by the sun and the moon move according to the plan. In the fifth verse of Ar-Rahman Surah, all of the three translators translate be husband by additional by using description and literal translation technique. The translator replaced the phrase be husband by providing the description of the phrase directly. So next is in the ninth verse of Ar-Rahman, wa aqimul wazna bil qisti wa la tukhsirul mizan. The first translator is meaning by so weigh all things in a justice and fall not short of the measure. Generalization meaning wazna by all things and establish equivalent bil qisti by justice. So the second translation meaning it by and observe the weight with equity and do not make the balance division. This is used two technique of translation. The first is establish equivalent bil qisti by equity and transposition wala tuksirul mizan by and do not make the balance division. So the last translation meaning waqimul wazna bil qisti wala tuksirul mizan by but maintain the weight with justice and do not violate the balance. By modulation, wa'akimu are meaning by but maintain and establish equivalent by do not violate. And the last is wal ardo wado'aha lil anam. In the 10th verse of Ar-Rahman Surah, the first translation use amplification technique by adding he to the target language. Then the translator used transposition technique by changing the position of ardo in wal ardo wado'aha, which literally means and the earth he set up to be he has set up the earth. And the second translation use literal translation technique to translate wal ardo wado'aha as and the earth and he has put down. The translator add the word he after translating the text literally. And the last translator also used literal technique and amplification technique to translate the first. However, the third translator has different word choice to translate wado'aha. And the second translator translate wado'aha by as put down. And the third translator translate wado'aha as set up. And here is four most dominant technique used by translator in the translated Ar-Rahman Surah. It shows that the first and the second translator prefer to introduce details that are not formulated in the source text in a bracket of footnote to translate the verses of Al-Quran, while the third translator prefer to use the term or expression recognized by dictionaries or languages in use as an equivalent in the target language to translate the verses of Al-Quran. And the conclusion is, as an international language, the existence of Al-Quran in English has certainly helped Muslim and Muslimah to catch the meaning of Holy Quran. Then it obvious that every translator has their own unique way in translating text, including the translating of Holy Quran. Even so, the translator should be able to transfer the message of Holy Quran correctly and carefully in the target language without changing the meaning of search language. Okay, maybe that's all my explanation about two articles in Indonesian and overseas version. And now we come to the conclusion from the fourth article. The research methodology. In Indonesian Article 1, they use This article presents study applied descriptive qualitative design which focus on the representing verb and moods of discourse representation, direct and indirect discourse. And overseas article 1, they use comparative analysis to examine the differences between the Swedish search text and the English mediated text and also Japanese target text. Well, the Indonesian article 2, they use a descriptive qualitative method, and the overseas article 2 also use descriptive qualitative research, which oriented to the translation product. The research data of the Indonesian article 1, they use Kompas as the representative of Indonesian newspaper and Jakarta Post as the representative of English newspaper. For the overseas article 1, they use the main sources of the data for this research is the Swedish science fiction book Universal Clothed in 2014, created by Simon Stollenheng, and its subsequent translation into English and Japanese. When Indonesia article 2, they use subtitle in Bajan Bajrangi movie. While overseas article 2, they use 78 verses of Ar-Rahman Surah and the translation of 3 different translators. Data analysis technique. The first article they gather data were qualitatively by following this step. The first step is classification of the data based on representing verb and discourse representation. Second, making description of every data in terms of representing verb. And the last is finding out similarities and difference among the newspaper in the term of discourse representation. And the second article, they use when examining both mediated text and target text, the translation as whole, they are both translated with loyalty that lends more toward the author that is thus toward in the audience. In the third article, the researcher used the following step to analyze the data. The first is reading the transcript and the subtitle of the movie. Second is identifying the translation technique used in the movie subtitle. Classifying the translation technique by Molina and Albier's theory. So the fourth step is researching the reason of the application of techniques used. And the last is drawing the conclusion. While the last article, the data were analyzed by using the translation technique proposed by Molina and Albir 2002. Maybe that's all from our group. And this is the reference of our presentation today. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Bintan. And without further ado, let's get started to continue for Q&A, question and answer session. So there will be 2 sessions. So the first session, the first session will be started from now. So for those who are willing to give us a questions, it's your chance now.
Good afternoon, Group 3.
Good afternoon, Intan.
Okay, I will ask a question here. Could you explain what is the difference between direct and indirect translation technique? Can you hear my voice?
Can you try to repeat again? So the question, repeat again, please.
What is the difference between direct and indirect translation technique?
Okay.
Is it clear?
So, yeah, now, so what is the difference between direct and indirect translation technique? Is that your question?
Yes. Yes, that's my question.
Thank you. Thank you, Intan. Appreciate it. The next question maybe for the second questions in the first session. One more.
Okay. Halo Rizky.
Yeah.
My name is Lutfia. I would like to ask a question for this group. Could you explain more about reporting verbs and mental verbs?
Okay. So your question is that could you please explain more about reporting verbs and mental verbs? So is that your question?
Yes,
Right. Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that we're gonna pause for the first session. So give us some time to answer those questions first.
Okay, Mas Rizky, I will try to answer Miss Intan's question. The
Okay.
question is, what is differences between direct and indirect translation technique? Is it clear? Is it right, Mbak Intan?
Iya, Mbak Binta.
Okay, I will try to answer. The direct translation is technique which it's used when the concept and structural element of the source language can be transferred or used into the target language exactly. The types of direct translation is like borrowing, calque, and literal translation. While indirect translation technique, it's also called by oblique translation. It's it's used when the concept and the structural of search language cannot be directly translated without altering the meaning or upsetting the grammatical element. In other words, this technique is used when the two languages and culture are further apart. And the types of indirect translation is like I mentioned before, like transposition, amplification, established equivalent, modulation, and etc. Maybe that's my explanation. Is it clear, Mbak Intan?
Yeah, Mbak Binta, that was clear. Thank you for your explanation.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Binta, for the answer, and then thank you as well for Intan Safitri for giving us question. For the second question is from Lutfia. Yeah, the question is that. Hold on, wait a minute. I'm gonna check it first. What is her question? So her question is, could you please explain more about reporting verbs and mental verbs? So um, for reporting verbs, as I told you before on the screen that I have already given you the example. So the word for reporting verbs, it can be say and tell. So it means that when someone like quotation, for example, when someone say, for example, Mr. Risky, and say blah 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 blah, so it's gonna be like, I'm gonna tell you something, so this is the reporting, I'm gonna tell you something, so it's kind of um, yeah, the thing in the reported verbs. And then same thing with the say, and also tell. When I say, when there is one sentence, for example, I tell you you have to go to school at 7, for example. So, and the sentence on the words after tell, it it can be a reporting verbs. So yeah, and it means that the reporter gives a natural evaluation of represented discourse. The represented discourse is not controlled by the reporter. It is presented to the reader objectively. Okay, so basically, in this article, uh, when 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 the researcher finds that there's one sentence and there is a sentence uses say and tell, for example, so this is a sign of reporting verbs. And the second one is that for mental verb, it is related with the thought, with the mind. So, for example, wonder and the word of wonder and also recall. So it means that when I say that I recall to all students to come to my room, for example, it means that I want to remind them again that they have to come to my room. So it is a part of mental verb. Then that we remind them, okay, to do something that we have already told them before. And in other words, the internal states of the subject of represented discourse is presented to the reader, and these verbs are not frequently used in the newspaper report to represent discourse. Unlike prose fiction, the actual spoken discourse of a news source is transformed into reporters' written discourse in the newspaper. So, yeah, that's my questions. What do you think, Lutfia?
Thank you, Rizky. That was clear answer.
Yeah, thank you. Uh, you're welcome, Lutfia. And then let's move on to the second session of our presentation today. So for those who are still want to give us a questions, please turn on your microphone.
Check. Can you hear my voice, Mas Rifki, Pinta?
Okay, check.
Yes, Au. It's the voice. Your voice is
Yes,
clear.
we
Yeah.
can.
Okay. Good afternoon, and I'm going to ask something about your groups. Actually, that was a clear explanation, but I'm still curious about something. So, based on your explanation, could you explain more about linguistic amplification? Is that clear?
Okay, so your question is that, could you please explain more about linguistic amplification? So, say
Yeah,
that
yeah,
problem
that's right.
again. So, linguistic amplification. So, basically,
Yes.
this topic is not from my PPT. So, hold on. There is one message coming from Dinta. She needs to go to bathroom for a while. So, wait. Please wait. Aulia, she will come back
Oh,
soon.
yeah, it's okay.
Wait,
It's
wait.
okay. Thank you, Mas Rizky.
Okay. Yeah. No worries. No problem.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Second, so, while waiting for Linda coming back to Zoom, so yeah, for the second question. So here we go. I think there is Alitani here. She's going
Yeah.
to give me and Linda a question. Okay, and the chance is yours, Linda. Alitani.
Yeah, so I just wonder if you could please give more example of indirect translation.
Okay. All right. Can you try to read it again?
Can you please give more example of
Example.
indirect translation? More example on indirect
Okay.
translation.
So the example. Okay, the example of indirect translation.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank
so
you.
okay, without further ado, thank you. Yeah, you are welcome, Litani. Okay. So without further ado, I'm gonna say that I know I little bit know about the answer of Litani's questions, and it's related with my presentation. She asked me about these. She asked me to give the example of indirect translations. So hold on. Wait. Okay. So basically, uh, in indirect translation, there are one, two, three, and four. So it's basically there are four example of indirect translation. The first thing, the first, mm, the first point for for indirect translation is that in audio visual translation. So in translation, okay, one of them is that audio visual translation, like in TV show, for example. So you can also take a TV show as our materials when you want to do uh, research. Okay, so you can for example you can download one video and you think it is important for you, and then you can observe, you can explore what did the people or the person says in that video. So this is we call by audio visual translation. Okay, that is the first point of indirect translation. And for the second one is that in translation of religious texts. So as we know that every religion has own faith.
Oh,
Okay, in every religion they have own faith that we can observe, and it must be in there lots of tons of indirect translation. So you can try to explore one of them if you want to try to explore another religious text. For example, it doesn't matter. It's up to you. So for the second point of the indirect translation is the translation of religious texts. So all religious texts, the Quran, and then for Bible, and then for all the holy books of the religion, you can try to explore too. Okay, that is for the second one. The first one is audiovisual translation. The second one is translation of religious texts. And for the third one is that in interpreting interpreting. So when it happens, I mean when we know when come on, wait a minute. So one more, interpreting relay interpreting. So when a conference delegate is speaking Danish and is to be interpreted into English or Chess, where no Danish or Chess interpreter is available. So the Chess output may be mediated via English people. So basically, when you join one of the conference, and then the conference consists of the people coming from around the world, for example. So for example, a speaker is not able to speak English, for example, and then we need, as always, we have earphone. For example, when we want to try to understand what he says, we can use, so basically the committee of the conference will give us kind of earphone, so we can understand what he or she says. Yeah, that's it. So this is we call by relay interpreting. Okay, it means that one person doesn't when someone says something and we don't understand, so we can use earphone to understand what he says. Okay. We need a tool to understand what he or she says. So we call by relay interpreting. So the way the people, so basically there is a person who will translate. Okay. And then and she or he will tell us uh, uh, through earphone. So we call this method by relay interpreting. Okay, next one is the last one, translation of manga. How to say manga or anime, manga. I don't know. Then exactly if you are a big fan of Japanese anime, so maybe you know this kind of um, what is that? How to say that in manga? I know exactly manga is, but for all for people know this one, so it will be familiar. So in translation of manga and anime, it's kind of comic, I think, but in internet, right? So yeah, and it is a common practice in Russian. For example, it is a common practice in Russian scanlation to translate manga via English translation, which are themselves indirect translation via Chinese. Russian unlicensed translation of anime are also commonly done via English. So basically, because as we know that manga and anime is from Japanese, so we can do translate from Japanese into English, for example, if you want to know the meaning in English. Okay. I think that's my answer. The first one, just want to remind you again that the first one of uh, what is that? The first point of indirect translation is audiovisual with TV. The second one is religious text with books and holy books of um, the faiths people. And the third one is interpreting or relay interpreting with earphone, as I told you before. And the last one is manga or anime. So, so we have to do hard to know the meaning by translating. Okay. I think that's it. That's my answer, Alitani. What do you think?
Yeah, thank you. So the job of the interpreter that use some tools, yeah. Yeah. Okay, okay, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome.
And I will try to answer the last question from Mbak Aulia. The question is, you want to know, you still curious about linguistic amplification, is it right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, I will try to answer. Yes, linguistic amplification is one of translation technique proposed by Molina and Albir. This is included into the indirect translation technique. And linguistic amplification is usually used when someone interpreting or in dubbing movie. This technique give additional element of linguistic form from the source language into the target language. For example, the source language is everything is up to you. The word everything is up to you. The target language it's can translated by semuanya terserah Anda sendiri. Actually, this there is an additional word sendiri in this sentence often in dubbing movie. Jadi kalau misalnya this linguistic amplification is to make match between the voice and also the subtitle itself. This meaning by linguistic amplification. Is it clear, Mbak Aulia?
Yeah, it's very clear. It's very clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
Okay. Binta, I think that's all for today, right? I mean, we have already opened 2 sessions of Q&A, and I don't think that none of friends, I mean, others will give us questions. I think that's all. What do you think, Binta?
Yes, Mas Rizky, I think that's all enough.
Okay, I think that's all
Let's-
enough for today, guys. Yeah, and
Let's
you want to
close.
say something? Let's close. Okay. The same thing at the beginning when we open this presentation uh, by 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 starting by making by doing prayer. So the same thing with when you want to close this meeting. Let's close this meeting by doing prayer together. Prayer together. Okay, thank you. I think that's all, guys, for today. I think that's
Okay,
all
Mas
for
Rizky,
today,
thank
guys.
you.
I appreciate it a lot.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Uh,
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You want to say something, Dinda?
thank you.
That's enough for me.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Appreciate it a
Thank
lot.
you, guys.
Thank
Yeah, thanks. Bye
you.
semuanya. Yeah.
Good luck.